Welcome, viewers, back to the Preaching Humanist with David Oliverio, that is I. And here I have with me my producer of my little show, Mark Vandenbrink.
Yeah, that's
Good
right.
to have you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Mark. I couldn't do this show without Mark. And as I preach humanism, the progressive philosophy of life without God belief, being good without a God, we depend upon other human beings because we all have our abilities and talents.
That's right.
And so that's what we do. So thank you, Mark, for being on the show. So we're going to get right into it. Just quick little interview. And if you have seen my past videos, most of them are preaching and teaching on humanism and why you don't need a God to be good. But I've also added to the mix various interviews with different atheists. So we like to call these shows atheist interviews to give my dear Christian friends an idea that there are various types of atheists and humanists out there. We're not all the same. It's not a uniform religion. We're not a religion. We're just people that think and have figured out the conclusion of the matter is this: there's no evidence for God. So we live our life and a fulfillment of life and finding meaning and purpose without a God. So I would like to do that today with Mark. So Mark, we're going to start from the basics. I would ask you about your birth and infancy, but you were a little bit too young for that. So tell us a little bit about your childhood. And I, as a former preacher, being raised in a pastor's family and becoming a preacher myself, it's very fascinating for me and intriguing for me when I run into fellow atheists and humanists from maybe a little different background. So tell us about your upbringing, childhood, and what type of family you were raised in.
Yeah, I suppose for the vast majority of people, it is a little bit different, right? I mean, most atheists that I know here at the ACA came from a religious background. I wasn't raised religious, but I wasn't really raised consciously secular either. Mm-hmm. We were Catholic, and we went to Catholic church, but it was mainly just to fit in with the community, to not be outsiders, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I remember in church for the longest time, I thought that we were all sort of playing make-believe, mm-hmm. pretend, mm-hmm. right? There was never a time when I actually believed that it was literally true. I mean, I early on I made an easy connection between the fantasy stories that I was reading. Mm-hmm. I read Knights of the Round Table, which is a Christian fable as well, but, mm-hmm. Nobody took that as literal. They were fantastic. They didn't think Merlin was true, and I just assumed that everybody knew that the Bible was just that sort of story.
Yeah.
Right? But I soon realized that people were taking it seriously. They were taking it literally. Mm-hmm. And that's actually when I became interested in religion. That was my main interest in religion. Mm-hmm. I wasn't interested in it when I was just being taught religion. Mm-hmm. But what sparked my interest in religion was wanting to know why people believed.
Yeah.
It wasn't... There was never any doubt in my mind whether it was true or not. I mean, it was true insofar as it fit with the world we know, right? I mean, mm-hmm. Maybe there was a Jesus, but the fantastical things didn't happen. Mm-hmm. And that was self-evident to me.
Yeah.
But what sparked my interest was wanting to know why people believed. Mm-hmm. And what the first idea, the first hypothesis of why that might be was sparked by my mother giving me The Hero with a Thousand Faces.
Oh, Joseph Campbell. Yeah. And I see
that
here in your library.
Yeah, it's actually right here.
Yeah, beautiful.
It, but Joseph Campbell's book, while I find it academically a little bit weak, I mean, it isn't, the sort of rigorous treatment of religion that is wholly convincing. I think Joseph Campbell and his correlate Carl Jung have some really strong ideas, and that was one of those landmark books that really coalesced for the first time an adequate reason why religion had such a hold on people.
Yeah.
And why they would obviously think some like fairy tales weren't true, but the Bible was.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that began my journey, and I went to school for history. and I went to graduate school for psychology and humanities,
Right.
and all of those things are all tied in insofar as they were ways for me to understand belief.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, and again, as I've just said, I'll repeat myself over and over again on this. We free thinkers and we atheists and agnostics and humanists, whatever you want to call us, my dear Christian friends, we come from various backgrounds. And here we have Mark coming from a very different background than I'd come from. Mine was the Pentecostal, charismatic pastor's home, where it was almost an anti-reason environment, where all we needed was Jesus, the Holy Ghost, and the Bible to pull us through life. It's always nice to meet people like Mark. Mark is an individual, and a lot of my other atheist and humanist friends who I like to kind of try to pick their brains and learn from. So we always learn from each other. And again, as I would say all the time, there's no need for a God for this. We have everything we need right here on this place called Earth with other human beings, using the beautiful division of labor and differences we all have.
Yeah, I'm also very interested in speaking with former believers because it's hard for me to empathize with that because I never had it fully. I mean, I there may have been times when I thought perhaps this is the case, but it wasn't something that guided my life. I mean, church was mainly just boring. Like I said,
Yeah.
you know, when I was actually taught religion, it didn't have much of an impact. It didn't inform me with regards to morality or you know how I'm supposed to live my life. And so speaking to believers is really interesting to me, not only because, like I said, I'm interested in why people believe, but also, and maybe I could ask you right here, like just the feeling of belief. Like what is it? Because any worldview has a tendency to inform how you behave, and how you look out onto the world and how you view it.
Yeah.
And I'm always curious because for me it was, you know, I'm sure we all have a fairly similar way of, you know, looking at the world.
Yeah.
But when a believer sees an object and I see an object, I would imagine there's a different feeling or a different approach, a different relationship between things and people.
Of course.
And
of
so
course.
I don't. Could I ask you like
Of
what?
course, you can interview me. You can interview me.
Like,
That's awesome.
when you were a true believer, how did the world feel to you? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, of course. Well, as I say all the time, I was in that bubble, the faith bubble, which I would call a major delusion at this time in my life. I wasn't able to see outside that bubble. Reality to me was the supernatural world. Okay. God was involved in every thought in my life, every decision I made.
So you would stop and say, well, I mean, what would Jesus do, right?
Well, pretty much. WWJD, yeah. I mean, what would Jesus do? Is the Lord directing me in this area? Have I prayed about this? Causation was always the Christian God because he was Lord of my life. So I really didn't have my own thoughts. And if I did, they were contrary to the Bible, or what we used to call in Galatians chapter 5, the lust of the flesh, and so forth. So it was more of a sinful, fleshy, carnal thinking versus reality. So yeah, the worldview, the way you look at things is very, very different. Yeah.
Okay. Definitely. Well, yeah, that kind of brings. I mean, I guess when any interaction that I had with somebody, you know, there was two things going on. I guess for me, it was, you know, how will my actions and what I say affect that person, right? It was very, like, you know, human-centered. He was very humanist.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And I wouldn't have articulated it like that, but it was the only thing that I thought mattered, really. You know, human beings were the only, you know, and now I think, you know, animals more and more, were the only things that actions could have any positive or negative effect. I mean, if you hit a rock, it's just an effect.
Yeah.
It's not positive or negative because you know, a rock doesn't.
It is what it is.
Yeah, and human beings and animals, you know, and so every interaction that I had was thinking like that, and also, you know, we're ultimately selfish beings too. So you know, it was also what can I get from the
Of
from
course.
the interaction as well.
Of
So there
course.
was that dynamic. It was the
Yeah,
two,
right.
So.
I mean, I think one of
But you know,
Right.
I maybe had like the super ego, right?
Yeah.
You know, something, you know, conscious. You know, my conscious would be telling me something that was something just slightly independent of my conscious me.
right, right.
So I could see where that would be sort of maybe a god-like
Yeah,
thing over your shoulder, right? But
Yeah.
most of the time it was just it would affect you.
right, right. Let's move along. This is interesting. We could go on for probably hours just
Sure,
talking
let's
like
go
this.
on.
So your passion for free thinking, I know you do a lot of work here in the community for free thinking. Was there a time in your life that you started developing a passion for advocacy, being an activist for science and reason and free thinking, and maybe helping others to see that faith is really not necessary in what I call modern civility in the year 2015, and maybe how faith sometimes can hinder human progress?
Yeah, well, when I was going to graduate school, I I wasn't anti-religious necessarily. I came to a point where I thought that believers and atheists were both sort of missing the point.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you take, you know, I saw mythologies as just like any other story with something to say,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know, a morality tale or whatnot. You know, it had some kind of lesson to impart. So for the longest time, I just thought that atheists and believers were talking past each other. They weren't really hitting the crucial point. And I thought the crucial point was just let's take a look at these stories and see what we can glean from them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you don't take it literally, I think you can discard the bad stuff and take the good stuff.
Of course, yeah.
Right? And so basically, it's an ever-evolving process of us. And I thought that some atheists were to you know, not to their benefit. They
Mhm.
were discarding
Mhm.
mythology.
Mhm.
Right? And I can sort of understand it, where you've been hurt by a religion and there's a tendency to reject it, right, and
Mhm.
reject any form of it.
Sure.
But I think if we want to grow as a species, grow with morality, taking in all information as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not just going along with it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But having a dialogue with
Right.
as much wisdom from the past as you can
Sure.
will help us grow. And I saw, so believers were taking it too seriously. Atheists weren't taking it seriously enough, and I thought there was this middle ground.
Yeah.
So when I was studying psychology and the humanities, at the end of my graduate program, I knew that I wanted to be an activist.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I wanted to dedicate my life to a particular cause.
Mhm.
I just didn't know what the cause was.
Mm-hmm.
And living here in Austin, well, I moved here to Austin 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that's 10 years ago is when I started. I went to 2 graduate programs. And right at the end of that, which is about 4 years ago now,
Mhm.
3 or 4 years ago, I started working on the Free Thought Resource
That's
Guide.
about. I was.
And this is really the catalyst that, you know, well, first of all, in order for me to decide what cause I wanted to dedicate my life to,
Mhm.
I basically just I tried to find out, well, what's the biggest issue in the world? What's the
Mhm.
biggest problem?
Mm-hmm.
And I came to think, and I still think this, that religion causes a lot of harm.
Mm-hmm.
At least the literalization of religion. I'm
Yeah.
fine, like I said, with reading mythology and gleaning
Mhm.
what you can from it, right?
Yeah.
But this blind obedience to religion makes people behave in detrimental ways. You know,
Sure.
everything about and it was so pervasive too.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's so many things that are bad. I mean, climate change, as far as you know,
Yeah.
we're concerned, is bad to us.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like sort of a one-off. It does affect the entire climate.
Yeah.
You know, but you could tackle that in very specific ways. Religion is so encompassing,
Mhm.
right? It affects
Mhm.
every aspect of our life. It affects
Oh, yeah.
how people think, how people behave, how people vote. You know, I
Yes.
mean, there's just so many things that it does. And so, well, what's the correlate? What's the not necessarily the well, you know, sort of the opposite of that? You know, the free thought and atheism.
Yeah.
And another little catalyst was seeing friends who thought like I did, or I do, or they couldn't talk to their friends and family about it because they knew
Yeah.
they would be ostracized.
Ostracized, yeah.
They-
Repudiated.
yeah, and while I have had some of that with some friends and family, not very much, but I have had some people react negatively to me being out. I mean,
Wow.
I've always been an atheist. People
Mhm.
just didn't know it. I mean, they would probably just assume that I was a Christian, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That happens
If you
a
didn't
lot.
ask me.
Yeah.
But seeing those friends not being able to be authentic, be themselves,
Yeah.
that pissed me off.
Yeah, yeah.
It,
yeah.
it, made, it made me angry, and I thought, well, I'm going to do something where I can maybe, I don't intend or think I can speak for other people,
Yeah, yeah.
but in a way, I wanted to kind of be their voice
Mhm,
a little bit.
mhm.
So
Good.
it was those two, and it was researching for the book, and deciding I want to become an activist, deciding what avenue I wanted to take with activism,
Mhm.
and then seeing the negative effects. Because before the negative effects of religion were kind of peripheral. I mean, there was nothing really negative about my sort of Catholic upbringing.
Yeah, yeah.
But when I saw close friends
Mhm.
being affected by it,
Yeah. Yeah.
Before it was only like, well, religion is harmful other places,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
It's harmful because of terrorism,
Yeah.
and but seeing the people that I knew personally get affected by it,
Yeah.
that was a catalyst.
Yeah, it does affect. We could take hours and hours in talking about individuals that we've known where faith in the supernatural actually has a negative effect upon you. And I know for you, my dear Christian friends that are watching this, and those of you that are watching are probably those that are beginning to notice these negative effects in your life. And you want to know, is there something else out there other than this God belief? Because there is a life of reality, and it's called living in this natural world without any God beliefs. And it can be very wonderful if you want it to be. Let's talk about activism for a little bit, and then we're going to get into the book that you wrote. I agree with Mark. I'm an activist as well, as you can tell if you've watched my YouTube videos. As a former charismatic Pentecostal evangelist and preacher, I still love to be an activist now for humanism and free thinking. I would like to use a quote from Jesus, and you're probably wondering, why the heck would you use the Bible? Well, I use the Bible a lot to help you see your logical fallacy. Hey, I made it rhyme. Pretty cool, huh? Well, Jesus did mention in the Bible 2,000 years ago, and I used to use this scripture as a preacher, look into the fields, for they're white unto harvest. Pray that the Lord would supply laborers to go into the field, for the laborers are few, but the harvest is great and plentiful. And what I would say to my fellow freethinkers, activists, atheists, humanists, and agnostics out there, the harvest is plentiful. We have over 70% of Americans who still believe that a deity in the sky, a transcendent, sentient, invisible deity, impregnated a Jewish teenage girl and gave birth to a God-man, like all the other myths, like Hercules, and you could help me on that one, and all the other mythologies, the perfect God-man. So we have 70% of Americans that still hold on to this belief. So I would say the harvest is plentiful, the labors are very few. So I would encourage us to talk and let people know that life can be wonderful without God belief. That's why I'm an activist. So I want to read one quote from a very major activist and atheist who died about 20, 30 years ago, from Mark's book, and we're going to talk about Mark's book. This really fires me up. Of course, this is Mark's book, Free Thought Resource Guide, and I guess it's on page 117 under the activism chapter. It's a quote by Isaac
Asimov.
Thank you. Why continue activism? Because we must. Because we have the call. Because it is nobler to fight for rationality without winning. Now, without winning, this was written maybe 30 or 40 years ago. It's changing for the good. Without winning, than to give up in the face of continued defeats. Because whatever true progress humanity makes is through, listen to me, my dear Christian friends, the progress that humanity makes is through what? The praying to Jesus? No. Through the rationality of the occasional individuals, and because any one individual we may win for the cause, may do more for humanity than 100,000 who hug their superstitions to their breast. Mark, I read that, and that's, by the way, cited from Positive Atheism, 2011.
Yeah, that's a secondary source. So,
Okay.
But,
I wanted you to discuss that. So this is from Mark's book. So Mark, I want you to talk briefly about your book, Free Thought Resource Guide. And before I let you talk about it, may I read is that the subtitle? A directory of information, literature, art, organizations, internet sites related to secular humanism, skepticism, atheism, and agnosticism. So
Yeah.
Mark, briefly tell us about your book.
That's quite a laborious subtitle, isn't it?
I liked it.
I couldn't condense it down to anything that encapsulated totally what the book does. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, this basically started off, like I said, I wanted to become an activist, and I'm, as a historian and growing as a scholar, I collect everything,
Mm-hmm.
and when you do research, make sure you save everything. And so I started to accumulate a lot of things. This was for very selfish reasons.
Okay.
I wanted to know what was out there,
Mm-hmm.
right? I wanted to know about the world of free thought, because I mean it was relatively new to me, but I wanted to know the characters and the books and all the information. And what I really found was that there's a lot of information, but it can become overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
It can become overwhelming. It's sometimes you don't know if things are reliable. Like if you go to a website and you see that that quote, right?
Yeah, right.
That's actually a good instance. That quote came from someplace else, but I
Right.
quoted the secondary source. So but I had to go and check to see did Isaac Asimov actually say that and whatnot. And so reliability is a big thing too, right? The
Yes.
world of the internet, there's a lot of misinformation.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I stumbled upon Christian sites that were sort of masquerading as atheist sites,
Mhm,
and of
mhm.
course you're going to get, they were doing that on purpose,
Yes.
to mislead people as
Yes.
far as what atheism was all about,
Mhm.
or what free thought was all about. And so I had collected a ton of information, and I started to whittle it down, and that was again for my own sake. And then I realized, if I'm having this problem and I'm spending a lot of time, right? I mean, this is what I'm doing my graduate school thesis on,
Mhm.
is that I was going to make this. It hadn't coalesced into a guide, but I knew this information I was going to turn into something, right?
Yeah.
And so since I was having difficulty and I have all this time and I'm willing to do it,
Mhm.
it was still difficult for me. I thought, well, obviously the casual free thinker, because not all of us are activists, right?
Yes.
I mean, most people in any worldview are pretty casual. Even
Yes.
Christians, the majority of Christians are casual Christians,
Very.
right? They believe it,
Yes.
but they're not going to study every word of the Bible.
No.
They're not going to be a preacher, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
So I wanted to make something that would help. I think it's good it's especially good for the beginner.
Yes.
Like you can pick this book up and you say, "Well, I want music.
Mhm.
I want to listen to a song that has, I don't want any religious overtones to it,
Yeah.
or even like, maybe I want a song that makes fun of religion, something
Mhm.
cathartic, or I want to read something, I want to read about a famous free thinker, right?
Mhm.
That sort of thing. So basically, it's a list of, you read it in the subtitle, all those things that I tried to make it as comprehensive as possible, but also whittled it down to the very finest.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I'd probably write the book a little bit differently now, a few years on, but
Mhm.
it's always an ongoing process as far as, because I'm always coming across new information. Like, I should have that in the book, right? Or I would eliminate things now. So this is basically a few years of me culling through all the best free thought stuff, whittling it down, and offering it to people just as a guide.
Beautiful, beautiful. Real quick, I know that we're going quite lengthy here today, and I want to briefly talk just a moment about an author. Mark, you were the editor of these books.
Yeah.
Joe
Zemecki.
Zemecki. I met Joe Zemecki a few weeks ago under the bridge where we, as I've discussed before, atheists helping the homeless are out there providing food and clothing to needy people. And yes, we do it all without a God. Joe Zemecki has 2 books here, which Mark has edited. Leaving the Quiet Room, My Rise from Religious Slavery to Atheism. I'm just beginning to read these books. Awesome stuff. Another one by Joe, Atheist Activist. So this is what I'm all about. What Mark and I agree about is making a difference in this world. And it's really more important for us to rise up and to speak and to do something. A way to find happiness in life is to find something that matters more than you do and devote your life to that. That's activism, especially if it's a good philosophy or something good that we are activists on. Yeah. So choose something that's worthwhile, and I say choose helping other people that are in need without a God, which is humanism. So, Mark, did you want to say anything about these before we end?
Yeah, those are memoirs of Joe's. And speaking of activists, Joe's been an activist in the atheist community for a very long time. He even worked with the national organization in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. He was out there, and he was actually hired by them.
American Atheist Association.
Yep,
right?
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, I mean, he's dedicated a big portion of his life to atheist activism.
Yeah.
And, he's helped start Atheists Helping the Homeless, which is just a phenomenal.
Yeah.
You know, those are the kind of things. I mean, a lot of what we do here at ACA. Well, I'll first start saying I think when it comes to activism, there's many avenues that you can approach. You know, you can go on. Like here in the atheist community, we often debate about the sort of tone we should adopt. Right?
Yes.
Should it be a friendly, kind tone, which I agree with predominantly, majority of times. But I think there's also there's room for different sorts of a more pressing, more militant sort of way to go about things.
Yeah.
And Joe is on the forefront, I think, of expanding the scope of what atheist activism means, right? Where before it might be just a few old white men sitting in a cafe somewhere grumbling about religion, right?
Yeah.
Where somebody like Joe said, no, it can be much more than that.
Yes.
And so he wanted to make sure that good deeds, atheism was attached to good deeds.
And that's where humanism comes in.
And so this is just his journey. The first book is on his childhood. And so how he came out of religion. So he was a theist at one point.
Yeah.
He went to a Catholic school. So that's even more than the average person which go to a public secular school. And then this one's predominantly his activism days. Okay. So I was really proud to edit those and
very good.
See what his story was all about.
Well, I appreciate all you do for the movement and being an activist, Mark.
Oh yeah, well, Joel was also one of the people who started the Atheist Experience.
Show the T-shirt. Atheist Experience since 1997. Yes.
Yeah. So this is our crew T-shirt. I don't know if you see it.
Yeah, crew. There it is.
And so these are the shirts you get when you join the crew. And so I'm one of the producers of the Atheist Experience, which has been interesting to say the least over the last few months because we used to shoot the show out of the Cable Access studio here in Austin. And that closed down, or it changed hands.
Yeah.
So we weren't able to use that anymore. So we came here to the library. We already had that in mind, sort of when we bought the building, and now we have it set up. And so we were shooting the Atheist Experience here, the nonprofits. And now one of my major efforts is to expand our programming.
Yes.
And you're the first of the non-grandfathered in shows. So
nice.
I'm really happy to have you. And speaking of different tones and different strategies, I guess.
Mhm.
You bring something entirely new to the
Mhm.
table. I mean, you have the preaching humanist is something refreshing. I think not only are different strategies useful,
Mhm.
right? I mean, your approach is useful. Atheist Experience's
Oh, yeah.
approach is useful.
Definitely.
Um, but also, not everybody's going to like a show like the Atheist Experience. Maybe
Mhm.
people don't want to listen to
Right.
people call in, right? You know,
Right,
maybe
right, right.
people just want a shorter show, something
Yeah.
that gets straight to the point. You know,
Mhm.
maybe the way you approach it, people
Mhm.
would like. You know, so
Mhm.
that's the diversity of programming I'm really excited about.
Yes.
And if you want to come join the ACA and you have ideas for programming,
Mhm.
we're open to do them, and hopefully you can
Wonderful.
make your show here, send it
Awesome.
out to the world.
Awesome. Well, once again, I want to thank Mark Vandebrake, my producer of the Preaching Humanist with David Oliverio show, for being with me today and giving us this wonderful information and sharing your life and opening yourself up to my viewers and talking about his book. So remember, here it is again, Free Thought Resource Guide by Mark Vandebrake is the book. So thank you for watching The Preaching Humanist with David Oliverio. Remember, no God is required for a life of love, joy, peace, fulfillment, meaning, and purpose in life. And the good life is one guided by reason and motivated by love. Have a wonderful day.